Hey, what's going on, everybody? You know how we do at this point, so let's just get into it. Today's video is going to be titled MAGA Loves DEI. So let's just get into it. If you know anything about the history of America, you know that, well, first of all, let's just skip it. What's the definition of DEI? You know what I'm saying? I was watching, I think it's like Charlie Kirk, who probably got his name wrong, but last name Kirk, he's like a super famous conservative person out here, MAGA representative, and listening to some other conservatives talking, like their real issue with DEI is saying that it's basically it's a bunch of people that it's like it's not merit based, right? They think it's not merit based. You're not getting the top people because you are basically excluding certain groups. You know what I'm saying? So they really have an issue, you know what I'm saying, particularly when it comes to black people, saying like, hey, if you're going to say you're going to hire a certain amount of black people, then you are inherently leaving out a whole group of other people that could yield a less qualified candidate, right? So that's like their kind of merit definition of that, right? Well, let's just usher in like the whole history of America, that America is a DEI hire. We are aware that up until around 1960, 65, that white men were the only people allowed to be in certain professions, right? Why do you think that they're overrepresented in everything, right? From every politician to business leaders and scientists and doctors. White men are overrepresented in every single job category, especially up the higher income. And why? They would let you think that it's because they're just naturally smart. You know what I'm saying? Like they naturally just ascend to these things. But no, they literally froze every other group out of competition, literally, for 400 plus years. So they have built up all these systemic advantages. Like, think about what that means, that you're the only people that can do anything for 400 years. That means like you've owned all the businesses. You've built the generational wealth. You have those social networks of all the other businesses and people. You're hiring their sons. You know, you're hiring the kid down the block that, you know, you have all those structural advantages that you have for being the only people in town. Right? And they love DEI. Like, right? That's what they're talking about, making America great again, right? You think about, what date are they talking about? I'm sure it was before 1965, right? Where I'm sure employment and wages were great for them. Why wouldn't it be when you were excluding 70+% of the population from everything else? Yeah, shit was real great then in that DEI hire, right? How could you, like, literally, you are pro DEI. You just want DEI for yourself. That was when America was great. You know what I'm saying? According to these MAGA people, if you really want to call it, during DEI. So they love it. They love DEI. They want to go back to it, just not for anybody else. So let's just get that down there, right? And specifically about DEI, they still love it today, even for other groups, just not black people. Ask yourself, have you ever heard anybody challenge veterans getting benefits and jobs when they come back here? What benefit? How does being a veteran qualify you for any other like job here? Is that merit based on what you've done scholastically, the experience you have in that job? Right? Like, doesn't that fall square in its face? You're talking about a school, like affirmative action in schools is wrong, but like using a military service somehow to measure up a scholarship or vocational performance, that's not DEI for a specific group. Right? What about they love helping disabled people, right? You're not going to say someone that's mentally challenged or someone that lost a limb or someone like that doesn't deserve the dignity of work. Like, you're not going to provide spaces from the work. Of course they would. They do. There's no problem with that. What about the elderly? They have elderly protections because they too will be old at some point in time, right? They too could be disabled at some point in time, right? They have no problem with women protections for the most part, right? All that is DEI. All of it. The only fucking thing they have a problem with is black people and people of color receiving any kind of benefit in that way. That is the only problem. They love it when it's them. They love it when it's any other group that they could benefit from directly or indirectly. But the one group they do not benefit from is people of color. Right? right? Isn't it? And that's what it is. It's a white supremacist move. You know what I'm saying? It's like they are perfectly okay with DEI, just not for people that look like me. Right? And what are they actually saying? They're saying that like, oh, and you can never get somebody that's of quality like them if they look like me. They don't have that. They don't say that about women. They don't say that about a disabled person. They don't say that about an elderly person, but they will say that about me. You know what I'm saying? Let's call it out. It's nothing but racism and white supremacy because you have no problem with any other group benefiting from it. And let's talk about why they fear it. And I feel like the biggest case and example is athletics. Right? The biggest case and example is athletics because remember, they throughout all sports and professional sports, they didn't let black people play forever. Right? And some of the arguments were they weren't civilized enough. They weren't intelligent enough to really play these organized sports. They could never really compete with white people. But lo and behold, look what happened. You start to give black people even an inkling of the amount of opportunity and resources, and they come up and dominate. And even in my lifetime, I was around the days when they said a black person couldn't be a point guard in the NBA because they weren't smart enough. They couldn't understand the game and have that leadership. They said a black person could not be a quarterback in the NFL because they weren't smart enough. They didn't have the leadership. They didn't have the foresight to do it. Now look. You know what I'm saying? They are fearful the same way that just opportunity and not even equal resources, just some resources given to black people, an opportunity will allow people to come in and dominate. And that's what they're scared of. They're scared of that. So what are they doing? They're creating this narrative that somehow providing opportunity is somehow racist to them. Somehow their shit is being taken from them. Like, think about that. Like the entitlement of that DEI, that you are thinking that all the systemic advantages you had for over 400 years where you didn't allow anyone else to compete, they now have ownership of that. Like somehow that they deserved it, that it's theirs for the taking. Like, no, it's not yours. You stole it. You use DEI and unfair practices to have these advantages. And now just the mere notion of equality is a threat to you. And somehow that is reverse racism. That is fucking insane. Like, think of the thing. That means you really must think that you have ownership. You really must think that you are superior. And to me, for you to think that means it's a real testament to how DEI works, right? That you have allowed white men, this specific segment of the population, and once you've given them all the resources, are you really saying that like there's no competition for any other race now? That the 400 plus years of unfair and unjust advantages have yielded so many structural advantages that not a woman, not a disabled person, not a person of color could even have a chance, right? And let's take this conversation just a little bit further into education because it really highlights, the whole affirmative action in education and stuff like that and opportunity. Like, because think about it. Like, if you are a person that grew up poor, right? You went to a public school, but let's say you did everything right. Like you were valedictorian, you took advantage of all the opportunities and everything like that, right? You didn't have all the sporting clubs. You didn't have all the AP classes or whatever, but you excelled at every level you fucking could, right? How does that black person that excelled in that environment stack up against someone with a similar resume that went to one of the top private schools or even one of the top, suburban schools with so many more resources? How do they stack up? You know what I'm saying? Like they can never resume to resume, right? The opportunity will never be that way. So if you're having a complete merit, based thing, how do you blame Harvard for choosing the person that went to the top high school and had all the resources and opportunities versus that person that never did, but even though they did the best that they could without opportunity, without allowing some kind of leveling for the structural things that the person doesn't have any control over, that it will always produce the same cookie cutter private school, person that has the money, right? That where's the upward mobility? You're just allowing this system of inequality that's been built up over generations to continue to exist and cover it in a system of merit when it's not. Those gains and those advantages that no one else can have were not gained through a merit. They weren't gained through merit. They were gained through DEI and structural shit. And so it's real funny that, like, now when it comes to say, like, hey, since we had racial segmentation that yielded all these disadvantages, we might have to have a little racial segmentation to equalize it out. But somehow that's racist. Right? So, and I think we also need to change our strategy and how we approach this. It's just like we always sit there and develop all these ideas and all these everythings and try to, get coalitions, but it always gets knocked down. It always gets knocked down. They're always just like, oh, well, this is we're not racist. Like, we agree that there are some damages, but this is just racist. We can't agree with this. It's always about the method, right? They always say we just can't get down with this because this is unfair. Well, then you come up with one. There will never be something that they agree with. Look at every single racial progression and rights of every other group other than white men in this nation. It has always been challenged by this same group. It has never been a social acceptance. It's even today. They are still trying to roll back the civil rights legislations today. Voting rights registrations, Voting Rights Act trying to be repealed today. Like, so there's never been this like group consensus of whatever. And black people personally have always had to unite with other groups. Like, it should have been enough that black people could have been able to get just exclusive things to address the inequities that we suffer. But we always have to have coalition with everyone else because we represent such a small segment of the population. But the funny thing is, they're cool with all that, but they're just not cool with ours. Right? So we have to change the strategy and allow them to say, okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to address these inequities? Because we all know they really don't care about them. They love them. They want you to think that they're natural. They want you to think that black people making 70 cents on the dollar to white people is natural. They want you to think that they're, so few black people in politics and business leaders. They want you to think that that's natural because of the merit of white people in white communities, when it's nothing but DEI, everything that they hate, right? And they're against it for black people because they know it works. They know that if you give opportunity, it will work. And they don't want their stolen advantages to go. And at the end of the day, let's change the argument. Let's call them out on what they fucking shit is and get some real change. They love DEI, just not for you. Until next time.